So this is going to be the first video for our this term, right? So really what I wanted to do is just get you kind of a little video and introduction to Maya, but I also just wanted to make sure really quickly you guys know where to get the software. Kind of already put it out there in kind of a message earlier before the semester started. But if you just go to whatever browser, in this case I'm in Chrome, it doesn't matter. You just go to autodesk.com, right? Autodesk.com, and it'll take you here, right? And this is where you're going to get Maya and Mudbox. Now, Mudbox we don't really use till about week 9, so if you want to take your time to download Mudbox, cool. If you've already done it, you're set. These early videos are probably going to be in Maya 2019 and Mudbox 2019 just because that's what I have, but there's really no radically new features that we're going to use. If you guys have 2020, that should be fine. I'll probably upgrade myself pretty soon. So if you see 2019 versus 2020, you're really not going to have any huge differences at all. Nothing really relevant to us. But if you go to Autodesk.com, you can go to menu here, and you'll see that there is an area called Students and Educators, right? Students and Educators. Obviously, I'm the educator. You guys are the students. And it'll take you to here, right? And then what you can do is you can go to Free Software, and you'll see that Maya is right there. Although if you click on View All Products, you'll actually see that Mudbox is also in here as well. So really what we're doing is we're looking for Maya right here and Mudbox right there. Now at this point, if you were to say click on Maya right there, you'll see what it does is it takes you to an area where you can sign in. In this case, most of you guys don't have an account yet. I already do. So you can create an account. It doesn't really, I think, matter what email you send it to, although cogswell.edu can usually be the safest. Just keep in mind that it might send it as spam, and so you might have to check, like, I think what's their ICE at cogswell.edu is kind of like where your spam stuff goes. So if you feel more comfortable, you can always kind of put in your email to be your personal email. And that's the kind of thing that when you create an account, right, you just click on it, and it'll bring it here, and you can kind of say, student or educator, institution type, kind of pick a region, and you basically just go through and fill out all of the information there, basically, right? So just kind of, let's see really quick, we're in California, or United States, really. So let's see, United States. We'll just do student for you guys, university, and you can put in a date for the birth, something old enough for you guys, basically, right? Hit next, and then of course what you do is you give it your name, email, confirm email, password, and you can kind of create an account. And I believe when you go in there, it'll ask you what school, so you just put in Cogswell. But basically, that's how you can start to create your own account for this stuff. And then once you have, you can sign in, or it'll automatically sign in, and then you can just kind of pick your version of the software, in this case Maya 2020 operating system. Obviously we're mostly all running on Windows stuff, language, things like that. And you'll see you're receiving a 1-year educational license, and you can kind of read a little bit here more. Basically you're getting the full Maya, but it's just educational. It is free. Keep in mind that Maya does need a reasonably decent computer to run. So unfortunately, if you guys get Maya and Mudbox and you're having tons of technical issues with it, remember, if you go to help at cogswell.edu, you can actually get signed up for our virtual lab, right? So that what you'll be doing is you'll be logging in and using kind of, you'll be working remotely from the Cogswell labs that already have the software. So obviously it's always great if you can get it local. If you've got a nice laptop or a good desktop that you really know can run this stuff, you should be able to download Maya and Mudbox, run it fine. If you are having technical issues, like maybe you only have a Chromebook, Maya and Mudbox are not going to run on Chromebook. So you definitely want to go to help desk at cogswell.edu, because that's our tech support, our IT, and they'll be able to get you set up with a password and an account to use the virtual network, basically. So you'd be using Maya's labs and Maya's computers and the software there remotely. Those are the options we can get you guys running with and all that stuff. But technically, if you've got a pretty good computer, you should be able to download Maya and Mudbox and have them run pretty well, and you can get them for free. You just have to sign up for a free educational account. So I just want to make sure you guys kind of had a quick rundown of that, basically, right in the video. So yeah. Now in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up Maya. Did I close Maya? No, there it is. Okay. which is screenshot background. And what you'll do is, of course, you'll see that Maya will be a desktop icon, right? You can kind of download, just double click on it, Maya 2019. It'll load up. And this is what Maya looks like, right? So when you first come into Maya, this is what you're going to see. Now, this first video is really just an introduction to Maya. The next video, we'll start to actually do some modeling. But you'll see, like most software, you'll go up here to File, and you can do New Scene or Open Scene. They have Quickies, Save Scene, Control S. You can import geometry from other applications. So if you go to Import here, you can kind of it supports lots of different formats: OBJ, FBX. So believe it or not, you can actually get stuff from 3D Studio Max into Maya. You can get stuff from Blender into Maya. You can get stuff from Modo into Maya, vice versa. So oftentimes you can take stuff back and forth between different software. So you can import and export stuff. You'll see there's send a Mudbox. So when we're using Mudbox, it'll make it easy for us to get stuff in there for doing some painting. You can even send to Unreal and Unity. So they have some nice little bridges to Unreal and Unity for games. You'll see some reference stuff later on in later videos, because there's a little exercise view for creating references. Creating projects, we'll see this early on, we'll use it quite a bit. And of course you can exit. So file is kind of your standard file, right? Edit's got a lot of your standard stuff, so undo, Control Z, pretty universal, redo. You can delete certain things. We'll definitely be talking about deleting history in Maya. You can copy objects. These duplicates are only for object level though. And we can even group and ungroup, and we'll even do a little bit of an LOD exercise later on this semester also. We can go to Create, and this is where you kind of get your starting point for most of your models, right? You can create primitives, NURBS primitives. We're really primarily going to be focusing on polygons because our industry really is pretty much a polygon industry nowadays. We'll be covering some spline stuff, talk a little bit about the difference between NURBS and polygons on later projects. But we're going to be primarily using polygons and use a couple spline modeling things. But that's probably Greek to you right now, and that's okay. We'll explain it more in later lectures, right? Later videos. But you have polygon primitives there, and there's things like three-dimensional objects, spheres, cubes, cylinders, cones. You see there's a lot in here, right? Actually, uncheck interactive creation. I have that turned on from something else I was playing with. Usually that's off by default. That is kind of cool, though. If you have that on, you can interactively drag an object in there. We'll talk about that a little more later as well. You can create lights. You can create cameras, right? And you can even create curves. That's what a spline is, right? Spline is a curve. We'll see that a little bit for certain models later on. You can create text if you want to. Free image planes are really useful. We'll be using those a lot. That's how you can load in reference pictures to work with. So if we go to the select menu here, you can see there's select all, deselect all. You can inverse a selection. You can grow and shrink selections. All these things we'll be seeing. So this is just an overview of the interface. We're actually specifically going to use these a lot more actually as we start to model. So you're going to get to see a lot of this. You're not even going to get close to seeing all of Maya. It is a big, complicated piece of software. So we're really going to focus on mostly core modeling stuff. Quick select sets are there. You can just select different component types with quick keys. So select menu's got a lot of your selection stuff, right? You can even convert selection types if you want to different selection types. Modify, you can center your pivots. You can freeze transformations if you need to. We'll talk about those a little bit more as we go on. A little bit of snap together we'll see later on as well for aligning stuff. If you need to, you can convert one geometry type into another right there. Display, you can kind of turn the grid off or on, right? So you can have this be visible or not. You can go to the options box. Whenever you see a little checkbox in Maya, right? See these little boxes that you can kind of highlight and move over, the checkboxes. If you click on those, it brings up the options. You have grid options, right? You can tell it to have more units. You can adjust how many subdivisions there are. So if you want your grids units to be a lot more, you can do that. You can turn different axes and off and on and play with the colors. You can, of course, turn grid off or on. You can go to the options for it. Heads-up display has some cool stuff like poly count. You'll see my poly count here. If you want that on, you can have that on. You don't really need it for our class, but it can be useful. Just check on poly count, and it gives you information on how many polygons, triangles you have, what's selected. We do have the ability to hide objects and unhide objects and show. We'll talk about that more later on as well. So you do have the ability to hide and show objects or even specific polygons. You can turn certain display things on, like normal direction for polygons if you want to see normals, right? Frame all and frame view can be useful, so we'll see those a little more as we go on as well. So kind of interesting there, right? Windows, Workspaces. We'll see this a lot more later on. You'll kind of see them over here as well. But Workspaces give you kind of specialized versions of this. We'll stick with Maya Classic just because we're kind of getting to see the overall Maya interface. But as we work, we'll see particularly things like UV editing. We'll use that as a workspace. But there are some focused workspaces. If you're doing animation, you can select an animation workspace. You can, of course, save a workspace that you make yourself and import it, so you can create your own custom ones. General editors, we'll see a little bit about hypergraph connections and hierarchy in much later videos. These tend to be a little more useful when you're doing more complicated rigging stuff. Usually if you're just doing core modeling for things, like modeling a desk or a thing, just using normal history through Channel Box Layer Editor or Outliner is going to be easy. We'll focus on those a lot more, but we will talk about how these are kind of different versions, different ways to look at history and kind of grouping, basically. So we'll see that in a later video. So yeah, some editors there, some specific modeling editors, animation editors, rendering editors like Hypershade. We'll talk about that later on. That's for materials. Render view stuff's there. User interface elements, UI elements. You can turn things off and on from the interface to show them, right? So we can turn Toolbox off and that disappears. So just keep that in mind, is that you have some of these kind of cool little things there that you can kind of minimize. Outliner we'll see a lot as well. It's kind of just a list of all your objects in your scene. If you right click on the word, you can close tab so you can kind of minimize it. We'll see a little bit of Play Blast when we get to doing some brief camera animations late in the semester. Mesh menu, particularly since we're in modeling right here, right? By default, you should see that. But mesh, you can use booleans. We'll see that in later projects. You can combine and separate objects. We'll see that as well. You can fill holes if you need to. You can turn a mesh all into triangles. You can mirror stuff if we need to. A lot of this stuff we'll be seeing as we go along. Edit mesh has things like bevel, bridge, extrude. Extrude is one of our most powerful tools. We'll see that plenty. Bevel. Usually if you see a default quickie in Maya already, it's something that's pretty useful and you'll use it a lot, right? So bevel's pretty useful. We'll be seeing that plenty this semester. We got a lot of desks and end tables to make. Merging tools, we'll see those as well. You can delete edge loops if you need to. Spin stuff, we'll see some spinning stuff, particularly when we get to our character creature, our troll later on. That's our last project, Project 6. And we can even duplicate polygons or extract polygons off an already existing mesh. So we'll be seeing a lot of these as well. Mesh tools has some other tools like connect, so there's kind of some duplicating from other things. The old insert edge loop tool, we'll be using multi-cut because it's got better default options, and it's got things like your slice and your manual, which we'll be using as well. Slide edge, kind of useful. Maya does come with high resolution sculpting tools, but unfortunately it doesn't really support high resolution sculpting, so these can be useful for shaping, but not really for full sculpting that you'd see in ZBrush or Mudbox, or actually a lot of software nowadays. Blender, Modo has it, Cinema 4D has high resolution sculpting. Maya kind of do it if they wanted to, but they don't. But these can still be useful. So just kind of giving you an overview, right? Mesh display, you can reverse the face direction if you want to in normal directions. You can control the smoothing angle between polygons right there. If you're getting deeper into gaming stuff, you can do some pre-lighting or vertex normal editing. We won't really dig into that this semester. Curves, this is where you can go to modify some of your curve stuff if you want to. We'll talk about some of this briefly. Surfaces, we'll definitely see things like loft, revolve, bi-rail, and extrude. Those can be useful, and we'll see those as spline modeling, NURB stuff. But we'll output as polygons, right? So we'll see some of this stuff as well, but really minimal, right? We're gonna dabble with a bit of spline modeling and surface modeling, but not hardcore. Deform. We won't see this that much, but you can do some cool things like bend or twist with these deformers if you want to. They're often used a little more for animation, but you can use them for modeling, so kind of neat that they're there. UV, we'll definitely see some UV unwrapping, but that'll be Project 5 later this term. So we can UV unwrap, we'll get to that later. Generate has some kind of XGen stuff, which is kind of a library of different procedural models you can drop in. This is where some of your paint effects stuff is at. There are some kind of plugins for Substance if you want to. Arnold. We'll be seeing this for our rendering later on. So there's some options in here for Arnold rendering. And of course there's a help file, right? So you can see what's new in the newest version. You can go to Learning Path. but this basically is help, right? Autodesk Maya help. So if you're ever in a weird bind, you can't, like it's on the weekend or something like that, and, maybe I'm not getting back to you or something, then there's always my Autodesk Maya help if you need that. All right, over here on the very right corner, you'll see there's Workspace, Maya Classic, right? You can click on this. That's that Workspace stuff that we kind of showed here as well. So there's a couple of places usually to get this stuff, and it has all the same options, right? You'll see below this stuff is things like modeling right here, right? And if we click on this, you'll see you can switch to rigging, and you see how all of a sudden you see skeletons, skin, deform. We can change effects, and you'll see fluids, hair, cloth, stuff we're not really going to get into at all this term. Animation, so you can set keyframes. We'll probably dabble with this a little bit because we're going to do a little bit of camera animation for an exercise. But for us, we're primarily going to be stick with modeling, right? And you'll see it's got the mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools. So if you ever get in mind you don't see mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, mesh display, curved surfaces, it's because you switched to one of these, right? So that's just a pull down. We click on it, modeling. Of course, right here you've got things like new scene, open scene, save scene, undo, redo as buttons. Selection types right here, particularly like object versus component mode. But we'll be doing different ways of getting that anyways. These magnets right here are your snapping tools, right? We'll be seeing those on later projects. You can turn symmetry on for modeling. We'll be seeing that later as well. And you can see some of the rendering stuff right here. So whenever you see these little kind of, take one, action, kind of clapboards, these are your rendering controls. That little kind of blue kind of sphere with the white center kind of looks like a weird blue eye. That's your hypershade for materials. And we'll see that a bit as well. We'll definitely do some material stuff when we get to Project 5 and 6, and we'll see that a bit there as well. If we go over, we can see that this controls what you see on this side, right? Right now you see it's modeling toolkit, but you'll see it's kind of, these are right here, but they're also right there. So if I click on this one, that's kind of the character IK1, and we'll bring up this one and you'll see it's there. You can click on this and you'll see that it's your attribute editor. Since there's no object, you don't really see anything. That can bring up your tool settings if you want it to. And this last one's channel box layer editor. But you'll see they're all tabs on the side here, right? So there's these buttons here that can bring these up, but also there are tabs here. Channel box layer editor, modeling toolkit, attribute editor, things like that. We'll be using modeling toolkit just because it's kind of it's got some really used tools at easy access right there from you. Not every tool. We'll definitely see some more stuff here as well. You'll see how you have your selection types right here as well, although even though there's technically nothing wrong with using these or the quick keys, professionals, particularly Cogswell instructors, prefer the right-click method. If you hold down, and we don't really have geometry in here, but if you hold down right mouse button, you see it brings up a marking menu. That is the preferred way. So I'm going to be using right mouse button a bunch, and I'm going to keep telling you guys to use it that way because professionals prefer it that way, and a lot of Cogswell teachers are sticklers about that, right? So even though technically you get your selection tools from right here, and you can even go to the select menu and kind of see them right here as well with their quick keys, the hold down right mouse button method for the marking menu is the preferred way. But there's other things in here that'll be easy to get to through modeling toolkit, so it'll be neat. So that's kind of a little bit about this interface. Channel box layer editor will show you layers. We won't really use those much until later on in the term, but we will talk about it and show how to create and use them. Right now there's no objects, so you can't really see the history of an object or its kind of basic transform properties at the object level, but as we start to create objects, we'll see that stuff in here. And you see modeling toolkit is just things like bevel, extrude, multi-cut, right? Kind of tools that we know are up in here as well. And you'll notice it's not exhaustive. Not every tool is in here, right? So whereas mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools will always show you every tool, you're not going to see every tool here. So there are definitely times where you can go up here to grab tools or just use the quick keys. Right here below that are what you call your shelves, right? So there's a curves and surface one, there's a poly modeling one. If you want, you can create your own custom one if you wanted to, right? So you can always kind of, or even go to custom here. And you can always just do things like Control-Shift-Middle, right? So Control-Shift-Middle, and you can actually drag them into your own custom one, right? So if you want to make some of your own stuff, you can kind of drag them in here and stuff like that. I prefer quick keys. and tools that have names instead of the graphical icons. So I'm not much of a big fan of the shelves, but they are there. And there's already some pre-existing ones, and there's even a custom one. And if you just, kind of Control-Shift middle mouse button on a tool and just drag and drop it, you can kind of make your own. Down here, you'll see that there is kind of the main viewport, and you'll see that there is a view menu here. And you'll see things like you can reset to default view. So if your view gets weird and it's not controlling the way you expect it to, just go into view here, default view. You see how you can play with the camera settings here. You can even add image planes to the viewport itself, which actually is annoying. We prefer the free image plane objects nowadays. But you also see things like frame selection, frame all, which are very useful there. Shading has things like wireframe versus smooth shade. We'll talk about the quickies for those as well. Flat shade, if you want to use default material, you can, or have wireframe unshaded, or X-ray, you can there. Backface culling. And we'll see a lot of these and go over a lot of these things as we go along. Lighting usually by default's fine, but if you want to see all lights in a scene for real time, you can. Show. This is really just visibility control for certain types. Like you can uncheck polygons and not have polygons show up in here. One of the cool things is up here is the isolate select, and we'll see this plenty this term. And you see it's got some controls in here. Render. You can actually have it use Viewport 2.0 in the viewport or Arnold. And panels gives you the ability to kind of, if you wanted to create a new perspective view, you could. If you wanted to create a new orthographic view, or like say front, back, left, right, top, bottom, you can from there. You can even have it look through selected. If you wanted to put a different panel in this viewport, you could, right? So you kind of have some kind of cool little options in the panels here for that stuff if you wanted to. Just kind of want to point that out. Below this are actually a lot of the same options, but quick keys, or buttons. Wireframe, shaded, default material, wireframe unshaded, right? Isolate selects right there, X-rays right there. So a lot of these are just buttons that kind of give you some of the basic stuff. You can kind of see film gate, resolution gate for rendering if you wanted to kind of see those in kind of the viewport itself, right? So just kind of a little bit about that. You can see right here on the very left side, we have our select tool, and then we have our lasso select tool, right? So you can kind of see a lasso versus kind of box. You'll see there's a paint select, although nowadays we prefer drag select, and there's a nice quick key for that already built in. And then there's things like move, rotate, and scale for moving, rotating, and scaling objects or specific selections on objects. And there's nice quick keys to that, W, E, and R. Right? So if you hold over, if you leave your cursor over a few minutes, it'll tell you rotate tool, and then there's that little parentheses E, right? I keep my cursor over that one. Move tool, parentheses W. That one right there. Scale tool, parentheses R. And that's just W-E-R, right, on your keyboard. Those are super, super useful, and they're actually quite universal nowadays. If you go into Modo, it's W-E-R by default for move, rotate, scale. If you go into 3D Studio Max, it's that way. Blender, it's not by default. Some of you guys might have already played with some software before, might use Blender, which in its current state of the 2.8 series is quite cool. Really great interface update for them. You can turn on industry compatible there, and it turns on My Navigation and QWERTY, and QWERTY is just awesome. W-E-R. Q is actually your quick key for your selection tool, right? So Q is, as we call it QWERTY, because it's the QWERTY keyboard, but Q, W, E, R are great, super awesome quick keys for this stuff. And they're pretty much industry standard nowadays, and they should be, because they're awesome. They just make sense in terms of ergonomics and easy to use in muscle memory. All right. So yeah, down here you can see you can go to 4 views if you wanted to, or single, or this can even take you to kind of 2 or even kind of different presets there. We're fine with that one being our default. In fact, if you tap spacebar on your keyboard, right, you'll notice it goes to, we'll set that to 4 just to make sure. So make sure maybe just tap 4 just to make sure that 4 right there, just to make sure. But right now we're in perspective mode. But if we tap spacebar, you see how it goes and minimizes perspective, and it shows you top, front, and side. Now, whatever viewport you put your cursor over when I tap spacebar, that will maximize that viewport. So now you see we're in top view. I tap spacebar, goes back out. I put my cursor over front view, tap spacebar, minimizes or maximizes front view. So when you tap spacebar, it will minimize if you're in one viewport, and when you tap it, it'll maximize. So I'll put my cursor back over perspective and tap spacebar. It'll maximize that. Now you notice when I tap spacebar, this thing comes up and then goes away, right? So if you hold down Spacebar, you'll notice it brings up what's called Hotbox in Maya. And what this does, you see how it's File, right? Modify, Display, Windows. You'll see here's your modeling. So it's kind of a great quick way to get to all of your menus for the whole entire Maya interface. So if you hold down Spacebar, you'll see it there. In fact, if you hold down Spacebar too quickly, you might click in the center on the actual Maya button and switch to a view like front view, right? I see this often with new students, right? So be very careful. Sometimes if you're holding it down just enough, you'll do that and switch your camera instead of just maximizing, minimizing. So if you accidentally, all of a sudden your perspective camera's gone and it's front view, hold down Spacebar, left click on the word Maya, and switch it back to perspective. But you notice how you can kind of get to that all through there, through the Hotbox controls. So kind of cool to know about. At the very bottom, you'll see is your animation tools, right? You can kind of play back stuff. Here's your keyframe things. You'll even see down here is kind of the, my video capture's on, but you'll see there's a script editor right there. So some options here, we'll talk about those a little later on when we do animation. So that's kind of a basic overview of kind of the overall interface, right? And as we go and we use this more, we'll be doing more with it, but I just like to go through and kind of run through the basic interface. Now, one of the things that's important, it's one of the first things we learn when we play a video game, right? Is how do you move your camera? How do you move your character? If you're using a controller, well, it's default left joystick, right? Left analog stick for move your character, right analog stick for camera view. It's a little bit different in 3D. But once again, Maya is also great at this, and a lot of software has options to turn this on, right? Not all software. Moto has the ability to turn it on. Blender, when you turn on industry compatible, turns this on, which is great. Because I think Maya also got navigation workflow right? If you hold down the Alt key, right next to your spacebar, so muscle memory-wise, it's already great because it's right next to your spacebar. So if I hold down Alt left mouse button, right? So Alt left mouse button, it rotates the camera, right? Alt left mouse button. Alt middle mouse button. That's your scroll wheel, but you press it down like a scroll wheel. You don't scroll it, right? Scroll it will do zoom. Although you'll notice the scroll zoom is jumpy, so we professionals tend to not prefer scroll wheel for zoom. So when we use Alt middle mouse button, it's really just pressing the scroll wheel down like a button. So if you press it down like it's a button instead of a scroll wheel, it'll move your camera. Alt middle mouse button. Alt right mouse button does zoom also, but it's a smoother zoom, right? So see how scroll wheel is kind of jumpy, whereas Alt right mouse button is a smooth zoom. So Alt left for camera rotate. Alt middle, right? Press the middle mouse button down, the scroll wheel down like it's a button, not the scroll wheel. It moves the camera. And Alt right mouse button does a smooth zoom for you. So that gives you the ability to quickly navigate your scene. And because it's just Alt and your mouse buttons, that's just ergonomically really nice and comfortable, right? Other ones don't have bad ones when they, but I don't know. I think the overall muscle memory and the ease of use of always getting to Alt right next to spacebar just makes it super elegant. Right, so QWERTY and my navigation, I really just think are the top, right? When I'm in Moto or Blender, I have that stuff on, right? I have QWERTY on, I have my navigation on, because it's just Maya got those really pretty perfect in my opinion. So that's the basic introduction to Maya. In our next video, we'll see how to start to build our first model.